Okay.
Good.
Tell me when.
Go ahead.
Welcome to the January 21st, 2021 meeting of the Walnut Creek Transportation Commission. Would the secretary please provide the video conference information?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this meeting is being held in accordance with the Brown Act as currently in effect under the State Emergency Services Act, the Governor's Emergency Declaration related to COVID-19, and the Governor's Executive Order N-2920 issued on March 17, 2020 that allows attendance by members of the Commission, city staff, and the public to participate and conduct the meetings by video conference. Video conference locations are not open to the public. As some attendees may be participating in their first Walnut Creek Transportation Commission meeting or their first teleconference meeting, we want to welcome everyone and talk briefly about the public comment process. To provide a live remote public comment, join the Zoom video conference meeting. The meeting ID is 914-5165 9236, and the password is 054635. When the chair opens the public comment period, use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you are connected by phone, which will alert staff that you have a public comment you would like to provide. Please wait your turn, and once brought into the meeting, we would appreciate if you would please state your name and city of residence for the record. Consistent with the city's public comments policy, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make their remarks. Should you choose to not provide comments but would like to view the meeting, you may do so in one of the following ways. On YouTube Live, visit the City of Walnut Creek's YouTube channel. On cable TV broadcast, Comcast Channel 28 within the incorporated Walnut Creek only, Rossmore Channel 26, Wave Channel 29, and AT&T UVerse Channel 99, or via live stream online on the city's website.
Thank you. Would the secretary please call the roll?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Salcido?
Here.
Commissioner Cagle?
Present.
Commissioner Ash?
Here.
Vice Chair Milks?
Here.
And Chair German.
Finally here. Okay, would the secretary please provide the public comment information?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. This portion of the meeting is reserved for comments on items not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the Commission cannot act on items raised during public communication, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer the item to staff. The chair now asks if any member of the public wishes to comment on an item not on the agenda. Please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you are connected by audio only if you would like to provide a public comment. And Mr. Baird-Nagel, is there anybody? There is nobody raising their hand. So we have no members of the public wanting to provide comments, Mr. Chair.
Okay, next on the agenda is the adoption of November 19, 2020 minutes. Would the secretary please provide the public comment information?
Yes, the chair now asks if any member of the public wishes to comment on adoption of the minutes. Please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you are connected by audio only, if you would like to provide public comment. And we are getting no raised hands. We have no members of the public wanting to provide comments, Mr. Chair.
Okay, commission considerations. Next on the agenda is an item for commission consideration, the 2022 to 2031 capital investment program. At this time, I invite staff to provide their presentation.
And we are bringing in Mr. Carlton Thompson. Just a second here.
Just a question, are we supposed to be approving the minutes from the last meeting?
Oh, minor detail. I forgot about that.
Because I would like to make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes.
I got so much into reading the script, I forgot
Happy
the
to
what we
second.
actually do. So we have a motion by Milks and a second by Cahill. I will go ahead and take a roll call vote. Commissioner Salcido,
Aye.
Commissioner Cahill,
Aye.
Commissioner Ash,
Aye.
Vice Chair Milks,
Aye.
and Chair German.
Aye.
Thank you. Carries unanimous. Now we're on to commission considerations, and Mr. Thompson is ready. Looks.
Good evening, Commission.
Evening.
All right, so tonight I have the task of presenting you the transportation element of the capital investment program, or the CIP, as well as what's contained in that is the first 2 years of that is going to be the capital budget. I'm going to share my screen so you can see all of that, and we'll talk a little bit about the process, and then we'll get into the projects that you should have had in your packet. This is the very first viewing of this transportation list of projects for the CIP and the capital budget. You're the first commission to see them and in the public. Okay, can everybody see the screen?
Yeah.
All right, everybody can hear me well? Yes? All right, thank you. Okay, so this is a study session, so we're seeking some feedback. Let me stay on one slide, I guess. I'm going to go over the CIP work plan and the timeline. I'll talk a little bit about how the CIP is developed, available funding and how we get funding for transportation projects. And then we'll go through the list of projects. Okay, so today we're at the study session. Intend to come back, I think in March, I think this is the 16th, to do another presentation, which would be to get recommendation to City Council for the transportation element of the CIP and for that first 2-year segment, which would become the transportation projects in the 2022-2023 capital budget. The council won't see any of this segment of the CIP or the capital budget until May, when they'll see everything all at once. They'll see the transportation element, the pros element, any of the other asset management pieces, downtown parking, and other components of the capital budget and the CIP. This is all aiming towards a council adoption of all of the budgets, the operating budget, the CIP update, the capital budget, all in June, so that the budgets all start in July 1. Okay, so transportation projects are created by first starting with the TIF list. This is the 30-year vision that assumes that you have infinite money and indefinite time to produce these projects. That list is part of what you'll see us start with in the CIP. And that TIF eligible list then feeds the 10-year capital investment program. That is a 10-year document. It starts to constrain the money, so we start to look at funding, but no funds are appropriated in more defined timeframes. We start talking about in the 2-year budget cycles as we go forward. The last time this was done was for the 2018-28. And so it's been a little bit since this has been updated. The 10-year CIP, as I've stated before, feeds into the capital budget. That's a 2-year spending plan. It is defined, and it does actually allocate funds to projects. The CIP does not. Okay, so where does funding come from? So from the general fund, there's about 3 million per cycle for asset management projects on a 2-year budget cycle. About 250,000 of that goes for traffic signal maintenance. The bulk of that 3 million really goes towards a lot of other city infrastructure, to include our facilities, storm drain, a little bit of roadway, so other things. Other things that fund the transportation side of things are grants and improvement districts. The grants are highly competitive, and our improvement districts that sometimes have turned into maintenance funds are very limited in use and scope. They can only be used for certain things or in certain areas. The traffic impact fee is the bulk of what you're gonna see funding a lot of these projects. That's a developer fund. These fees are assessed to new and expanded development projects. We anticipate about 4.6 million. That's a low number, and that's the number you're going to see that start with. It's still being reviewed by Finance Division. And then we assume a projection in the out years of about 400,000 per 2-year cycle, or about 200,000 a year. That does change, and you'll see in the worksheets that in the 24-25 realm, I have projected something higher than that. Just simply because of where the funding sits, or where the project sits in our analysis so far. But we can never really rely on when the developer fees are going to come in, because it really depends on the development cycle. All right, so we're going to update the 2018-28 10-year CIP to the 22-31. And then, of course, as I've said, it relies on the TIF eligible project list. And we're unable to really forecast funding much beyond 3 to 5 years. In the CIP, it's okay to have unfunded projects and okay to think big. And at this stage, in this very early stage, it's also okay to have some unfunded capital budget items as we start to really seek input and look for funding. But we really try not to keep those first 2 years. We really try to program funding for those first 2 years. Okay. Any questions so far?
No.
All right. All right. So again, the goals are, we're going to go over the overview of the project scopes. I want you to ask questions, provide comments. So, interrupt as you have questions so we can go through this. I see one of the commissioners has a raised hand.
I have a quick question. In terms of the traffic impact fees, are they, is the formula for how we forecast for that impacted at all by a shift from the level of service to the vehicle miles traveled sort of approach to how we look at developments and the impact on traffic?
That's a really good question. That I don't quite know the answer to, and I don't know if Smadar or Steve wants to jump in on that one. If you want to do that.
Yeah, I can go ahead and jump in on that. So great question. Traditionally with developing TIF fees, you would use kind of the number of trips that you expect to be added to a traffic network by development that would be going on. Sometimes it's kind of related to like level of service, but it really is mostly based on the trips generated. Currently, our TIF is based on that, and it's kind of like a best number that council was able to come up with that kind of reflects what transportation improvements we're expecting based on the number of trips that would be developed over the course of time. What I will say is that our TIF list will get a much more substantial update after the general plan update comes through. And at that point in time, we may look at correlating TIF fees with VMT as opposed to just trips themselves. So that's definitely something that we're looking into for the future. But for now, it is kind of a set fee that goes up with inflation every year.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
It's Jared. What about the fees from the gas taxes? Where do those come into?
So I can answer that one. The gas tax fees come to the city in the form and are primarily used for the roadway and maintenance and storm drain maintenance projects for the most part. You'll see some of that money get programmed in some of these transportation projects as well. And whenever we can get some synergy between doing some repaving and doing some transportation work, we will do that. We've been doing that with, I think you saw, if you've noticed, been down the Broadway Parkside, we did a little bit of that with that project where we repaved. We did a little bit on Main Street. We continue to look at opportunities to do those things. So we'll combine in a larger project, both Measure J and gas tax money along with TIF money where we can to make a complete project. Okay. Okay, so is that all questions? We're good? Okay. I'm going to ask you to provide comments, and then also, if there's some prioritization that you want to shout out for one over the other, or moving forward into a different year, you can give us that feedback as well. I think we're going to jump right into some projects. All right, so first on that list is the pedestrian improvements and unsignalized crosswalks. You're going to see this is a reoccurring project, and I probably won't show this slide at every budget cycle, but if you look down through the budget cycles, you'll see this project come up, and it's recurring to address some of those pedestrian improvements at unsignalized crosswalks. The next project is the bicycle master plan. This is also project money to put into implementing facilities per the bicycle master plan. We've done a little bit of this already, and we're going to continue to add this to both the CIP and continues all the way out through the cycle, and then roll it into each of the budget cycles, the capital budgets. Walnut Boulevard Sidewalk. This is a project that's been slipping back a couple of budget cycles, and we're going to commit to doing the preliminary design in 22 and 23. This is that sidewalk gap in front of Walnut Heights Elementary School. It's really difficult due to narrow roadway width and some right-of-way and the grade separation, grade difference, as well as, but this is that sidewalk gap closure between the county pieces that have already really been done up to the school. So the next one on the list is traffic signal at Treat Norkel. This is also looking at trying to improve some pedestrian mobility across Street Boulevard at that between those neighborhoods, and just to the west of Carondelet. This is a project, the next one is started off as just intersection improvements on Broadway that we brought to the commission back in 2019. And it has morphed into a whole corridor project that we've already started some preliminary layouts on, basically from YVR to Civic down the Broadway corridor. This project is going to put a bit of Broadway on a road diet.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna add to that. So we really wanted to make sure that the commission got some time to hear a little more details on this project. I brought it to you back in November, and we had kind of said, hey, let's make this into one of those TIF eligible type projects, rather than looking at the intersection improvements themselves at Broadway and Arroyo and Broadway and Carlbach. We're really looking at Broadway, like Carlton said, between Ignacio Valley Road and Civic. And the intent here is that we want to implement a road diet, which is where you're removing a couple of travel lanes, reallocating that space for bicycle facilities, pedestrian facilities, and just generally traffic calming and traffic safety improvements. And the intent with this is it's actually an opportunity for us because there is the Affordable Housing for Sustainable Communities grant that our housing division is actually chasing after in terms of grant applications. So we thought that this would be a really good project that would go well with that affordable housing application. And that affordable housing project is located at 699 Ignacio Valley Road, so Ignacio and Civic. So this is a nearby facility called out in the North Downtown Specific Plan, would just be a really valuable active transportation connection. And it really checks the boxes on that grant application itself, meeting kind of the requirements, making for a really strong grant application. So we wanted to bring this to you just to make sure that you're feeling good about it because council is going to be, they're going to be recommending approval of this project actually in advance of the CIP coming through because it's going to be part of that Affordable Housing for Sustainable Communities grant. And they'll be hearing that during the middle of February. So just some high level concepts or design concepts. Again, we're going to be implementing high quality bicycle facilities. So we're really looking at either bike facilities that are at grade with the sidewalk or maybe slightly taller than the pavement and the sidewalk. We would be retaining parking on both sides of the street, one traveling in each direction. You've got a center turn lane. And then we're gonna look at doing intersection improvements where we're implementing bulb outs. So really looking at reducing the crossing distances for pedestrians. And we'd also be doing some additional green infrastructure improvements in some of those locations too. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer that right now. Okay. How about just generally maybe getting, how are you feeling about that kind of project?
Do you need a recommendation for us for city council?
I think, ultimately city council is the one who's going to approve the project, but they are at the ad hoc committee meeting earlier this week. They were really looking for kind of just a general consensus from transportation commissioners that, they're kind of behind this type of project.
And just for a short bit of clarification, so this is a study session tonight. Staff is seeking general input from the commission. And we'll be bringing back the formal draft recommendation at the March meeting. And at that point, we'll be looking for an actual official, motion and whatnot to make a recommendation to the council.
Right.
I think
sorry. So again, for clarification, the council will be hearing this project specifically at the mid-February council meeting. So in advance of any recommendations within the CIP list. So if you have any, just like thoughts or general, feelings about this project in particular, if you could voice that now, it would be, I think, helpful for council members when they see this project come to them in February.
I think from what you've explained, it sounds like a really great project and a very holistic approach to addressing how we can improve the downtown area. And so I am very supportive of this, and I think it's exciting. Especially, I really like hearing that we'll be including green infrastructure, and I'm guessing that might include things like rainwater collection through, cuts in the curbs, or I don't know if what exactly would be included in that, but I like the idea of incorporating that, especially in the downtown area.
I really, really like this project. I've always felt that between Civic Park and Main Street was just kind of this ignored area. Everybody else has gotten improvements around that area, but specifically on North Broadway, if you're trying to walk between the two, it's unpleasant, it's dangerous, it's not easy. And so this is kind of filling in that gap, and also hopefully bringing a little attention to this part of downtown that has kind of been neglected a little bit. I don't think intentionally, just maybe by default, but and so I wholeheartedly support this, and whatever you can do to make it easier for people to walk around and bike and get between the Civic Park and downtown would be great. And then also considering it might be going in with, you know, livable communities and affordable housing and everything. I mean, car ownership is, you know, at least $10,000 a year according to any estimate. So if you would talk about affordable housing, kind of can't talk about that without the whole picture, which includes transportation and options for walking, biking, mass transit, and BART. So that to me like ties it all together.
This is Commissioner Cahill. You have my support as well. I think it's a fantastic project. You know, anything that helps move forward affordable housing, and then also provide residents with access to our city's core, and then transit, I think is just a fantastic project. I agree, it is a scary experience being a pedestrian in some of those areas, and crossing Broadway in some areas can be pretty scary. So I'm excited to see it move forward. Would you mind pointing out on the map exactly where the housing is going to be located?
It's not actually on any of these locations, but the housing location is at the intersection of Ignacio Valley Road and Civic. Okay. So it's just up to the north of where we're showing these maps. It's the southwest corner.
It's the old abandoned gas station.
Right. Okay.
And then we're also in separate from that, we've been receiving interest on the former DMV site, which is of course right there at the corner of Arroyo and Broadway, for some mixed use development in accordance with the North Downtown Specific Plan.
Fantastic. I would imagine that construction on top of an old gas station site will require quite a bit of environmental cleanup, hopefully. I wonder how long that will take.
Yes, there's definitely something that would be analyzed and addressed before construction begins. My understanding is that I believe a fair bit, if not all, of the necessary remediation has already occurred on that site. I think the tanks and everything are out of the ground. I could be wrong, but I believe that's the case in there.
Excuse me. Does this plan also include the abandoned restaurant across the street from the gas station?
I'm sorry, what was the question there, Mr.
Across the street from the gas station is an abandoned restaurant office now.
Oh, yes, at adjacent to 1111 Civic, where the Mechanics Bank headquarters is.
It might be now. A long time ago, it was a restaurant.
So I like the project. I like the concept. I like that you're covering a lot of elements. As part of a traffic slowdown, which I get is the safety aspect, how does that affect the flow of cars, both in a normal non-COVID world of transportation down YVR towards BART and 680 and all of that in particular?
Yeah, great question. So this location actually was evaluated in the North Downtown Specific Plan and was specifically identified as an opportunity site for a road diet. Broadway got overbuilt on this segment. It doesn't really connect you to much. You end up kind of at a dead end. So right now people kind of use it as a cut through, but it doesn't really gain you all that much in terms of travel time. Like I wouldn't take it. So we would rather, put more effort on improving operations on, the path of least resistance here. So it was already evaluated as part of that North Downtown Specific Plan from the traffic analysis perspective, but we feel pretty good about not having to need that additional lane in each direction.
I will say that what we looked at preliminarily for this piece will line up with what we've recently completed on Broadway as part of the Broadway Parkside project, as we've reconfigured the lanes and added the bike lane on that segment north of YVR on Broadway. Okay, can we move on?
Yes.
All right. All right. Next project is the Shadelands bike lanes and sidewalk gap closures. This is a new project, and it is based off of what was coming out of the Shadelands multimodal plan. I think the commission may have seen this once before. We had not started any design on this because we did not put it into the 21 capital budget, but it is going into the 22-23, and we will look to do some of the improvements that are identified in that Shadelands multimodal plan, which I don't know if it's completely been approved by council, but it's getting close. Okay.
Can I just ask one question about that? Oh, that's it. That was the canal trail. The next slide was going to answer my question. That looks like that's going to be improved.
It's already done. So I wanted to highlight this because we showed this to the commission in 2019 as something that we wanted to work on, and you can see in the far right picture what it used to look like, and the two pictures that are kind of overlapping into the middle and to the left, me looking at it anyway, is are pictures that were taken today. So we've repaved that, widened it, and improved the connection off there to that's Wiggett, and then across back over across the bridge and over to the canal trail on the other side. So that's all. That one's all done. We were able to do that with some money, some other money that we had for some trail projects in the parks, and so we used it. We used it for this one. So we got a little savings. So we were able to fit this one in.
That was, I appreciate that. I've taken that path in the last 2 weeks, and I definitely noticed the improvement. Can you go back to the previous slide? I do have a question there.
Yes, sir. Okay.
If you look right there on the corner of I guess it's Shadelands and what is it, Wiggett, that the Shadelands Art Center is, where you have all, is that the right corner?
Yes.
Somebody, you have the preschool, you have all the performing arts classes there. There is no sidewalk from Shadelands Drive into the rec center there, the art center, and there is no safe crossing path anywhere there to get into that building. So everybody who's coming in from the canal trail, in from the sports complex, or from any of the neighborhoods, there is no safe way anywhere from that centerpiece.
Okay, good. That's, and I think we know that as well, and we'll. But thanks for bringing that up, so we can really look at that as a component early on in that list of projects. Anybody else? Okay. Okay.
Carlton, actually, if I may to add to that, I know some of the information you're looking for is of course what's on the list and what should be on the list, but you're also, I believe, looking for input on prioritization. So I think I would actually be encouraging the commission to provide comments just like that in terms of what should be first, second, third, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in these this first cycle of projects, because these are the ones that are going to turn into capital budget projects that will start to turn, engineers loose on pretty soon to get plans done. And if there's something that, an element that we can move forward quickly, that's a higher priority than something else, then of course we'll take a look at it, just like we did with a project that we just talked about with the canal trail, where we heard that as a priority, and as I found an opportunity to take care of it, we were able to work that in. So if something comes up later, just interrupt me and we'll go back. Okay, so this is a citywide traffic calming project. This is a 2-cycle project, so it's in 22, 23, and 24, 25. And it's an implementation of traffic calming improvements that come out of the Neighborhood Streets program. And I think Smadar has already really presented this to you in November already. Similarly, you've got the school area active transportation and traffic calming project. This one is focused on the school crossings and school routes. Same picture, copied the slide, so there's a lot of slides in here. All right. And then citywide bicycle amenities. This is another 2-cycle project to address safety improvements, also presented at the November 19th meeting by Spinar, and it's to implement some of the strategies from Rethinking Mobility, looking at how to improve some short-term and long-term bike parking and bike repair stations. I snagged a picture somewhere off of the drive that showed this bike parking area out in front of the coffee shop on Locust as an example of some protected bike parking. And we'll just look for more opportunities to put those in. Andy and Ozzy and the group at traffic engineering have I think a few of these sites, and you may have already provided some ideas to them as well that we'll be evaluating for places to put this kind of stuff in. Okay, so this is a summary. This is that first 2-year cycle. For 22, 23, this will become the transportation inputs to the capital budget. This is the amounts we think that those projects are going to cost. And if there's anything unfunded, you'll see that in the far right-hand column before the notes. And you'll see that right now, I don't necessarily have all the funding for the traffic signal at Treat Boulevard and Norkel. We'll have to either figure that out before we take it to the capital budget, or we will have to pare that down to the design piece and come back for construction later. Same thing for Shadelands multimodal as we go forward in the process and get some other stakeholders involved. There may be some opportunities for some grant funding or some funding to come from somewhere else. But right now, we're not recommending TIF money to go towards that particular project unless the commission decides otherwise. I will say that I'm starting with an estimated starting number of 4.6 million, so the TIF fund is healthy, and this would its allocation, if it goes forward as shown, would pull $1.4 million out of that fund, and for these projects. Okay, any questions? All right, ready to move on. So we're going to go through another list of projects for the next cycle, which will be that.
Actually, sorry, I do have a question. So like the 2 projects where you don't have the full funding, what kind of timeline are you looking at, or do you show that to us in the next year? And
yeah, I'll try to resolve the funding piece before we come back in March. Whether or not we'll have it or not, because quite honestly, I don't want to go to the council with unfunded projects in the first budget cycle, but we'll work that part out. If there was something that you thought that you wanted to shift more money into traffic impact fee to cover those, now would be the time to let me know.
I'd like to see the Shadelands project start happening, because I think there is a lot of kids that will, middle school, high school kids that will start using it. There's that sports complex there. And, you know, it's underutilized now because of COVID restrictions, but you have a large number of, 5 to 20-year-olds that are going to be using activities there, and they're going to get there. Anything we could do to make sure that they get there safe from like the middle school or the high school, which are both on the other side of YVR, you know, and create bike paths. I think that's important.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. I'm going to move on to the next cycle then. Thanks. I really appreciate the feedback. Okay, so the next project, sorry. The next project that comes up is Parkside Drive's sidewalk gap closures. There's been a lot of development up in that area in the past several years. And this will just help. This is on the west side of the BART station, and I think you can see the arrows in the TIF project where it makes that connection of trying to help improve some pedestrian mobility out of those neighborhoods over there, make some connections. This is to look at Overlook Drive to Hillside and Buena Vista to San Juan. We have put a little bit of effort into doing some pieces over there, but this is just and some of this will have to go with for right-of-way acquisition. So this project just does preliminary design. The construction will come in a future year, and you'll see that as we come through the projects. This one is the Mobility Hubs project. It's been on there for a little bit. And I think as originally envisioned, the Mobility Hubs project was different than maybe it will be as it goes forward. And talking to the transportation planning staff, they will be looking for a possible TLC grant to fund $200,000 to start to really study this in more detail. But I know that they had originally looked at doing some bike share stations. That probably won't be what comes forward, but it may be something related to bicycles and charging or something like that.
I can add to that just a little bit on the mobility hubs with regard to the funding. We were approved or granted a TLC grant, Transportation for Livable Communities, from CCTA, being funded through Measure J, the transportation sales tax. But unfortunately, the COVID pandemic has had a significant impact on sales tax revenue. And as that we hadn't actually been allocated the funds yet, this project, along with a lot of others that were going to benefit from the same grant, the funding's been put on hold. It may come forward in the future. It may not. It really depends on what the anticipated and actualized sales tax revenues are in the future. So we're hoping it's sort of on hold for now. We are still planning on going forward with it, but just not right away.
Yeah, so just as a reminder, this one is sitting in that 24-25 budget cycle. So then not this upcoming budget cycle, but the one following. We're hoping that by the time we get to the point of putting this in the capital budget, some of the stuff will be resolved. But we want to show that this still has some priority to it. Okay, so improvements on Broadway. I think we talked about this one already. This would be the construction phase. So we're programming the construction phase for those improvements that Smadar talked about on Broadway in the 24-25 timeframe right now. But of course, that all depends on some of the success for grant funding and some other things. Ignacio Valley Road Safe and Smart Corridor Study. That's a mouthful. This project is one that was suggested by the Transportation Commission in 2019 while we were doing our previous CIP update. And this is, it came out of the discussion that we had at that point where it was suggested that we not only look around the BART station for some connections and some ways to move people across YVR, but maybe we should look at holistically the whole YVR corridor. So this is going to be a multimodal corridor study and would be in partnership with CCTA. We've talked to them a little bit about this already and being more of a regional effort since YVR is such heavily used transportation corridor for a lot of the county. That's kind of all I have for this one right now. This is a big deal, actually, because it starts to set up some projects that you're going to see later in the CIP, some projects that provide some of the other connections, but this study, doing it soon or early enough with some of the money from CCTA that we hope to get as we get out of the COVID environment will really help unlock and define some of those projects that come later in the CIP. You want to add anything, Smadar? And questions?
If Smadar would like to add something, I don't want to interrupt that train of thought, but okay. In looking at this broken down, what we're spending in 22-23, obviously there's some carryover from the estimated funds that would be available in 22. And I'm wondering if you can comment on a little bit, obviously, 24-25 is anticipated to be a big spend year. And I'm just, and this does sound like a great project, although I suppose it's unfunded at this point, now that I'm looking at that more closely. I guess I'm just curious why some of the projects might not start in 22-23 and we're pushing some of the funds to the following year. If you can just touch on some of the philosophy and thought behind that.
Right, so some of it has to do with whether or not I expect some of that carryover to happen, which I do. However, some of these projects are a little bit not as defined at this point, so we've chosen not to show at least TIF funding against them. It doesn't mean that as they go forward, they won't gain some other source of funds, but right now I'm not programming any TIF funding unless the commission says, hey, we would like to put some TIF funding towards this, and then we would make those adjustments.
I was just going to comment that I think addressing this corridor is really important. And right now there are a lot of challenges in terms of just a lot of traffic bottlenecks and it's not very pedestrian or bike friendly. And there aren't a lot of alternate corridors nearby that can be taken in place of Ignacio Valley Road just because of how the city was developed. So I think it's a really critical piece of the puzzle in how we address our transportation issues. And I just don't know, it seems based off of the price tag and what we are expecting to have in terms of the traffic impact fees in terms of funding, that it probably couldn't be moved up any earlier. But it just pains me that to even conduct this study is still years away. And I think I'm just glad that it's on the list and it's in at least the second grouping of projects. But I just don't know if there's any way to get any piece of this started any earlier, if that's just not at all feasible.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I know Smadar and I struggled with where this should go in the order and what budget cycle. I know that we are actively looking for an opportunity for this one in particular, so if it's able to come forward faster based on your comments, and if the rest of the commission would say, yeah, we would agree with that, then we would absolutely, come back at a time where we thought we had a better opportunity, or we would say, hey, we think we could, the funds are better than what we show, then we might be able to move that whole thing forward. But right now, also there's a limited ability for us to kind of to go and manage a project like this with a consultant too. So with some of the other workload that we currently have. So that's also plays a role in when we're trying to do this, but it is one that we are trying to move forward because as you'll see, as we go through the rest of the list, you'll see that it does unlock a few of the other projects and start to really help define them and shape what their size and scope is really going to be.
It's Jared, does the smart corridor study concept, does that include like the engagement of autonomous vehicles, 5G connectivity related to that, as well as maybe micro transit, like more vans going through the neighborhoods, bringing people to BART, whether they're the autonomous shuttles that you've seen in San Ramon and other places?
Yeah.
Great question. So sorry, Carlton. So really this would be one, first and foremost, it is a multimodal study. And so we're looking at all the different types of transportation, and that definitely includes innovation. We definitely intentionally use that smart corridor terminology, because what we're hoping we can do here is partner with CCTA, because there is this Innovate 680 program that is currently ongoing. And there was I think it was Measure J 2.0 that did not pass, but it was additional sales tax funding for implementing improvements as part of looking at the 680 corridor. But just so you know, Ignacio Valley Road is one of those arterials that connects to 680. And so it would be considered a part of the study area. So what we're looking to do is leverage some of that ITS, the intelligent transportation type of improvements as part of this corridor, considering, you know, it could be autonomous vehicles if that's something that is allowable at that time, transit, maybe it's, you know, dedicated transit lanes or part-time transit lanes, looking at ped and bike improvements, and then still looking at, you know, vehicle traffic flow, better traffic signal technology, communications. There's a whole slew of, you know, tools in the toolbox that we'd love to go ahead and try and get implemented along this corridor. The question is, you know, what funding sources we can grab or capture, but still trying to address all of those. So definitely open in terms of scoping for that. And I think when it comes time to get this corridor study launched, we'll likely come back to the Transportation Commission with like our scope of work, just to kind of vet that, to make sure that all the elements are addressed, just because this is such a huge, important corridor in the city.
Okay. Thanks, Minar. Next one is the adaptive signal timing, putting that technology in along California Boulevard, Civic Drive, and Broadway. I know that graphic shows street, and this would be, I think, the city's second try at getting the adaptive signal timing done. But this would these are the locations that we're talking about for this piece of work. The next thing that's in here is Main Street intersection redesign. There's two intersections at Bonanza and Cypress on Main Street. They are two of the oldest intersections in town, and it would really help to improve some pedestrian flow. We have a hard time moving those signals around right now because they're very, very old. They're the only concrete poles we have in town. And they really interrupt the ability to modify the curb ramps and do those things. There may be a companion project that comes as part of some of the downtown relook that we may be able to partner up with in this, and it may come forward a little faster. But anyway, this is to focus on the Main Street and those two intersections in particular. Well, of course, we would also be looking at bicycle mobility through there as well, because that's something else that we're already looking at designing, is some bike lanes. So this is the Lincoln Avenue bike path, and it is this is the design piece of that from Iron Horse Trail to Main Street. The pop-up was successful in getting feedback from the neighbors and users, and this would be to kick off the true design of that component and get it, and then get it. You'll see later that it'll get constructed in a later CIP. Of course, if we have more requests and we got funding to be able to do it, we will always move things forward as we can, and it may shift some other things back. But this is where this one's sitting right now.
So I have a question about that. Why is the actual construction 2 years down the line?
I think right now, because I don't have a really good funding source for it, but let me look.
Yeah, that's right, Carlton. We don't have funding for that construction of it, based on the preferred alternative that the Transportation Commission had voted on about, well, I don't know how long, over a year ago. So it's in the millions range. We don't have sufficient funding through TIF for that project.
Oh, and I'll also say that some of the utilities are still doing some upgrades along that corridor, right? So East Bay Mud just had gotten done in there. We think that Central Sand is also, they're trying to do some work in the downtown that also may include some work up a portion of this corridor. And so we're kind of waiting for some of that to happen. And some of that has actually been delayed because we've been trying not to impact the businesses during COVID. Even though there's less people downtown, the restaurants and businesses downtown really rely on things being open and being able to have a lot of mobility across the right of way. So those projects have been delayed. So looking out, we're trying to figure out exactly when that lines in. So it's not only funding, but it also is opportunity.
What about options for quick build infrastructure along Egan Avenue before that?
Yeah, so what I would suggest there is we should complete the design component first. And, there are quick build grant opportunities that have been made available more recently. So we can always pursue that if that's something that you'd like to direct staff to do. But we would certainly need to get a design put together in order to actually implement that appropriately.
I'd sort of like to piggyback on Danny's point that this is the only safe route for bicyclists through the bike path to downtown Walnut Creek. And the construction project is 4 or 5 years off, at least. It seems if we're going to move people to downtown without cars, we ought to go through Lincoln.
Okay. That's what we need. We need your feedback.
And this is one where we've already done extensive neighborhood outreach, community outreach. We've had a testing run. It seems like there might be a lot of options to get downtown, and there should be a lot of options to be, for people who want to walk and bike and wheelchair accessible and everything. So there should be a lot of options, and this just seems to be one of the ones that has the most work done already. So it should be the closest to being done. Also, one of the big question marks we had originally was what to do for the last section between Broadway and Main Street. And it seems like COVID and the city staff already answered that. And that seems to have not saying we don't need to, actually build infrastructure there, but can we close that down or limit traffic on there? And it seems like the answer is resounding yes. So now we're like, great, let's put this together. So I personally would like to see this, at least the planning stage, move earlier so that we can, if possible, maybe get some quick build infrastructure in there within a few years, and then the ultimate time frame can, still be several years out until we get, the final grand plan. That's my personal opinion.
Anyone else on this one? Okay. And this is a new project for wayfinding and parking signage to help with pedestrians and bicycles move around. I assume this is in the downtown. Yeah. It's not a lot of money programmed for this one, but it's probably not that hard to imagine. A few signs don't cost all that much.
Yeah, I if I may add something, back in probably, and Andy can probably help me remember, it's probably about 2012 or so that the city came out with, you know, the new colors and the kind of the purple and orange, not exactly that, but the purple and orange. They put signs up around town like "Welcome to Walnut Creek," and it was a huge, you know, rebranding of the city. And they wanted to put all these wayfinding parking signage downtown, but it's all oriented towards cars. And they had many outreach meetings, and from that, I feel like came this idea that, hey, it's not just cars, like people and bikes, you know, on bikes, people on foot, like need to know how to get around as well. And so, not like, I feel like this became important at that time, and it was brought to the city council's attention, but it still became shelved as like, well, we don't have money for that, but we do have money for the new signs that are related to driving. So just putting that out there that this has been talked about for a long time and keeps, you know, being pushed out as well.
And this is Spinard, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a 2-cycle project. So we would put money in 24, 25 and 26, 27, right?
Yeah, that's right. And this is implementation of some of the strategies that came out of Rethinking Mobility. So really looking, the wayfinding signage in particular is really looking at trying to help navigate pedestrians and bicycles, especially as it relates to BART, but just generally in the downtown and other kind of heavy active transportation locations. So really just, you know, looking to put some money towards those actions and those strategies. And it is like a 5-year plan. So we expect that this would actually, you know, get implemented sooner rather than later.
Okay. Okay, so this is the end of the second 2-year cycle. This is just to summarize kind of where that is. And I think it was mentioned earlier, this is a heavy spend cycle that would spend pretty much all of the projected funds, at least as they're shown right now, with a lot of that going towards that North Broadway improvement construction. You'll see that there's also money to continue the bike facilities for master plan, the pedestrian improvements at unsignalized crosswalks, and then the citywide bicycle amenities and the school area active transportation traffic calming. There weren't slides for those on this last round, but they continue on. Okay. Any comments about amounts, unfunded, anything? All right. And you can see the Main Street one, we're programming some Measure J money for that one. All right. Speaking of smart stuff, fiber optics projects are to help improve our traffic signal infrastructure, which helps us to do a lot of things.
Is there fiber optics on Ignacio now?
No, there's not. We are currently in construction with a project to connect the City Hall to the traffic signal cabinet at YVR and Civic. It is not complete yet. And that would at least get us out to that point. And then as we move forward, we would start to fund projects to get some fiber into the YVR corridor. There is a project, I have a project right now to pave YVR next year. It's an OBAG funded project, and ahead of that, I'm trying to get those traffic signal cabinets in that paving area all connected to where we think we already have conduit available for fiber in YVR. And so that project got approved at council last night. And we will be moving forward with getting at least the infrastructure necessary to pull the fiber. And fiber optics projects aren't just the fiber, there are all the equipment that goes to convert the cabinets and the signal infrastructure from the analog or the copper wire over to the fiber. But adding fiber also allows us to do other smart mobility things, like be able to talk to very smart cars, and also be able to see up and down the corridor in a way that we can see, be able to anticipate things.
So the goal of this project is to run fiber from where to where?
So I think this one is to run it down the YVR corridor. When we get into 26, 27, we'll have a better idea of where we're at, what the costs are, because we'll have done a little bit already. But the first piece of this would be to finish YVR. And then we would start to look at doing all of the arterials and connecting the signal cabinets and all the arterials. And I will tell you that I will take every opportunity I can with my paving projects to get as much done with other money, that non-TIF money, to do those as I can.
So has there been any consideration given to leasing fiber space to non-traffic causes?
Not at this time.
Because if you rent their cable, you could lease space.
Yes, and that's just something that hasn't been really brought forward at the council level.
Okay.
How does the deployment of the fiber impact that 5G and the soft cell deployment down YVR, both for city use and customer use?
Yeah, so our fiber project would ensure that we have control over our own infrastructure and our own data needs, not only to our signal infrastructure, but potentially to other city needs, independent of the commercial infrastructure, which our charges for data up and down that corridor for other city facilities gets to be quite large in terms of the city cost overall. So some of the fiber optics is in support of the fiber master plan.
So let me ask my sharing space question a different way. Have the public safety departments expressed any interest in sharing the fiber with you?
Have public safety
departments expressed an interest in sharing space with you?
No.
It sounds like perhaps there's no more questions from the commission at the moment.
I just kind of want to make sure.
I have a comment. Given that this affects the same corridor, I guess I don't know where we will land after the YVR smart corridor study, and how that might impact future design. And I mean, maybe it's not going to have a huge impact one way or another, but it seems like there might be some potentially significant changes to the corridor coming out of that would be recommended coming out of that study. And so I mean, I guess there will be future opportunities to reevaluate this, given this is still quite a few years out. So it might be no need to worry at this point, but I definitely would want to see how that study might impact how we would phase in this versus other potential projects that could come out of that.
I absolutely agree. Okay, I'm going to move to the next one. Signal master replacement. This is the signal master in City Hall was replaced a few years ago, and we're just programming a replacement of some of the technology and equipment, not only in the City Hall signal master room, but potentially in some of the key cabinets up and down inside the system, because it will have been at least, I think, 10 years since the last master upgrade was made. And you buy a computer, you know that most computers don't last 10 years. So. ITS travel monitoring. This is to, I think I'll let Smadar talk a little bit more about this one, because we start getting out into that realm of ITS, and an engineer like me starts to get glazy-eyed.
Sure. Yeah. So this is a project that's been living in the TIF eligible list for a few years now. I'm really just trying to leverage any kind of intelligent transportation systems that we can to help improve operations. And it's beyond just operations for its, of course, vehicles, but we're also monitoring performance, the health of our infrastructure itself too. So this would be implementation of that along these specific corridors is what we're calling out here for this year. This is the actual construction phase of that sidewalk over at Walnut Heights Elementary. So design in 1 year or one budget cycle, and construction in another. This is also because I'm not anticipating that I have all the funds in that first year to do it. So all right, here's a project that's been pushed a little bit, and it's also a really large project, which is the Oakland Boulevard and Mount Diablo corridor improvements. And this is that connection from Trinity out to Mount Diablo, and I think we're looking at some of the Mount Diablo per. So this is for doing preliminary design per the West Downtown Pacific Plan, and we've moved it back because things haven't moved. And the construction would be scheduled in the 28-29. You see that in what you already have. And the construction estimate, I would expect might actually be double what we were preliminary estimating in 2016. There's a lot of grade issues down Oakland, along with a lot of utilities. And Mount Diablo has its fair share of a lot of those things as well. This is the construction side of that Parkside Gap Closure. And this is the end of that third cycle. You can see that forecast shows that we're kind of out of money at this point, and still trying to spend 2.8 million. As I said in the staff report, I don't anticipate this actually being true. That we will have development that will continue, that will feed the TIF, and that we won't run out of money, but it may not be enough to cover the full 2.8 by the time we get there either. So just be aware of that. I mean, especially as we get into this third cycle, we really are guessing on the funding, and I start to really guess on how much these things are really going to cost too. Okay,
And all the project cost estimates are based on what we know today in terms of some of these estimates. As we get closer to putting them in the capital budget, they'll actually get more robust and more vetted cost estimates. Okay, so this is the next cycle. So we're starting the projects in the fourth cycle. And this is the Olympic Boulevard Trail Connector. And this is to connect the bicycle and peds underneath of 680 down Olympic Boulevard and out into the west part of town and out towards Lafayette. It requires really a lot of work underneath of the freeways there and potentially widening some lanes and doing some other things with the abutments on the Caltrans ramps and overcrossings. So this is going to take some environmental work, some analysis, and some design in conjunction and in coordination with Caltrans. So we've pushed it out that far right now and looking at construction in 30 and 31. This next one is Newell Avenue Bridge widening. This is a construction phase because we're currently looking at some design options now with the traffic engineering team and trying to figure out whether or not we really actually need to widen the bridge. This project could move forward much more quickly if we don't have to build that bridge. And just so the commission understands, we are in design with 2 bridge projects right now. The bridge on South Main Street is well into design, and I imagine that by the time we hit this piece, it will be well under construction. And that is a significant bridge construction project. We're also working on the Bancroft Road bridge project that is also in design and probably will be in construction or completed by the time we get to this one. So just looking at bridge projects alone, there's a significant amount of work. And we use consultants for those. So, but this is to look at improving the pedestrian connections from that South Broadway and those neighborhoods up the hill there down into this part of downtown as it continues to develop. And when I say pedestrians, I also mean incorporating all the bicycle amenities in it as well, because we are looking at that complete streets. We have the complete streets mindset in all these things that we do. The next project is the YVR sound wall and sidewalk. This is to really, this is going to be a really tough project that impacts the neighborhood there that backs up to the sound wall. But to relocate that sound wall and to get some sidewalk and some bicycle facility or something down that edge of YVR. Again, this is one that will be part of looking at in that corridor study, what we can and can't do through there, but it is very constrained. But its limits are from La Casa Villa to North San Carlos Drive. So it's right where as you come down past John Muir and you're right up against that living wall or that sound wall right there on the edge of the road. So this is to try to get through that, all of that.
How effective is that sound wall?
I don't know.
Just curious.
When I first started here, that sound wall had a lot of plants and it was hanging into the traffic and some other stuff. It's been trimmed back quite a bit right now, but I haven't. I don't know.
Does that sound wall back up to the property line of the residents?
Yes, sir.
It does. Wow.
I think if we had another opportunity to get in there and move that wall, we probably already would have done it. And I believe there's, if you look at that corridor, there's a significant pole line, a PG&E pole line that runs down that edge too, I think, and you can see that in the picture here. So it's with a lot of these projects, it's not just the physical moving of the barrier itself. There are other things that have to get moved, and when we get run into utilities, especially these significant PG&E pole utilities, that gets tough and the timelines get long.
Yeah, because right now along that part of that side of the road, there's no way to, there's no pedestrian access. You have to cross YVR, and then if you're going from the hospital to that shopping center to get lunch, you have to cross twice to YVR just to get a short distance away.
And there is a bike path out the backside of John Muir back into those neighborhoods to the east that crosses. There's some stuff back in there. So there is a way to get back to those neighborhoods, but there's not a way to go down Ignacio, from the downtown. And if you're going all the way out, there's not a way to really walk or bike all the way out that way, which.
So this project has been pushed back to at least twice.
Oh yeah.
Should it even stay on the list?
Yeah, we're hoping that the corridor study will really help us understand what we can do inside the roadway and figure out maybe whether we can squeeze that roadway a little bit or make some changes with some lanes that we might be able to gain a little bit of room towards the inside, but we don't know. I mean, we won't know until we actually start to really get some help in studying that and looking at the whole corridor. Because if you just look at this one project all by itself, then you might make that change for that one little corridor or the one little segment, and it might just mess up both ends. And so we really don't want to do that. And then, of course, as I said, the utilities are a significant challenge.
Yeah, it does seem like a lot of these YVR projects are somewhat contingent on what comes out of that study, whether they remain relevant or not.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. That's such a great point, because as you'll notice, we do have all these projects on the list, that TIF list from several years ago. So we're really actually pleased that the Transportation Commission, last time we brought the CIP to you all to look at this, really suggested a corridor study and looking at this holistically, because yeah, you're right. There's a ton of different pieces here that we have that should really be planned out simultaneously, and then we can go ahead and implement.
Agree.
Okay.
Okay.
And I can add to that also that I've been advocating through Transpac, which is our sub-regional transportation coordinating committee, I think is the official term, that serves CCTA. Been advocating through that to do try to get funding for a corridor study in conjunction with the county and Concord, and it's definitely received some positive reception, but of course money has gotten a little more scarce with sales tax revenue going down. But it is something that we are definitely trying to go after on all available fronts.
Okay, how we doing? Ready for the next one? So this is the construction side of the Lincoln Avenue bike path. I think we've talked about this as, if we get an opportunity to move it forward, we hear you that you would like to do construction and quick build sooner rather than later. And so, but this is where I'm at in the current one. Whoops, that's too far. Okay, sorry. That brings us to the end of that fourth 2-year cycle out to 28, 29. And the spending that goes along with it. Okay, any questions, comments? All right. So this is the last set of projects because we're getting into that 30-31 time frame. So we're almost 10 years out from now in this CIP. So this is the Newell Avenue adaptive signal, builds on the earlier adaptive signal projects. Of course, the graphic is the same. This would be the construction of that Olympic Corridor Trail connector underneath of 680 and out and to down Olympic. It says FY 2029 well, from construction of the design from 20 that we would hope to complete in 29. And then this would be construction of that Oakland Boulevard Mount Diablo corridor improvement piece. And that's also assuming that we get the money to do the design work and we find the money to do the construction. Here's some additional YVR projects for bike paths, Iron Horse to Bancroft and Bancroft to Viamonte. There are two separate projects shown on your sheet. They would be to construct the class 1 bike facility. Now, once we get to Bancroft, there is some opportunity to work with those trails that are already part of the right-of-way and roadway that go down YVR, sometimes on both sides of the road and sometimes just on one side. And so we would be looking at adding or widening some of those trails that already exist. And then we're showing going from Bancroft to Viamonte because we got with the Safeway project when the developer came in, we got a widened path and made a trail that connects from Viamonte all the way up to Oak Grove, and then starts to turn the corner and go down Oak Grove towards the north, towards Concord. And it's projects like this, when we show them in the CIP, that help that when a development comes in, we can point to the developer and say, you could build this too. You could build your piece of it, or we could partner up to do components of this work. So that's also the importance of having these projects sitting in the CIP, even if there's no funding really available for them. It's to help the development community understand that we do have plans to do things along those frontages in these realms, and that we wish to add the bike and ped to these transportation facilities to make them truly multimodal. Another traffic signal at Civic and Arroyo. I think this is the we'll see if all the other improvements make this a need or not, but looking at that. And then bike path from Bancroft Road to Las Juntas Way. I think we showed this as a project sometime in 2019, maybe to provide a connection from BART to Bancroft.
I have a question about this. As far as it's concerned as a project, is it the path? Does it include any lighting or anything like that for during the winter when we're limited on light for commutes? And then another question about bike paths. I'm curious, with the Iron Horse Trail, do we know if the East Bay Regional Park District is planning any sort of improvements, bike facilities, anything like that?
Don't know. That's a very good question. So we'll have to look at that.
I can speak a little bit to that. The county actually recently completed work on a corridor study, which I believe has been adopted, if I remember correctly, for really actually the entire Iron Horse corridor. And it looks like it plans for a wide range of improvements. Kind of depends on which segment. Obviously, when you're going through Alamo, it's planned to be a lot different than, when it's going past Pleasant Hill BART. Funding, of course, is always the challenge. But the first step is, of course, always getting a plan in place, much like this, with got North Downtown Specific Plan, which eventually leads to this 10-year CIP, which then leads to capital budget. So there definitely are things in place. This particular pathway wouldn't directly connect to the Iron Horse Trail, would connect to other facilities that would then bring you to the Iron Horse Trail.
Right. I guess where I was going is if any of this could be shared projects or, where there might be synergy.
No, point taken. And I think I stated earlier, whenever I can do that, we definitely take advantage of it. And looking for some projects in conjunction, maybe even with the Water District for some of their bikes. They have the Contra Costa Canal Trail to do some things there. We did do a little bit of a project with Pleasant Hill where we added a sign over at Putnam with Pleasant Hill to improve that trail and bike connection there on Contra Costa Canal Trail there at the crossing at Putnam. And so we'll look for those opportunities and do that. And riding at night on some of these trails is really dark. Right.
I was going to ask that, and maybe Andy, this, is there any plans for lighting on that or other improvements on any of those trails by the respective agencies to help people commute better, safer?
Yeah, I do remember that the corridor plan, the county's plan did have lighting in certain areas. For example, like around here, but maybe not necessarily through, say, Alamo. I don't remember all the details outside of the Walnut Creek area.
Can we get, and I know it involves maybe either our staff or these other agency staff, but it would be great sometime this year if we can get an update as to any planned improvements in Walnut Creek related to any of these trails, either by the Water District, East Bay Parks. So if we could put that into this commission's 2021, that would be great. Hear more.
I'm making note of that right now.
Thank you.
I can tell you about open space trails. I'm working with I have a presentation for pros in a couple of weeks, similar to this one where we'll go through all these projects. I've been looking at trail projects with the staff. Okay, let's see. YVR at Bancroft and Walnut intersection improvements. This looks to improve some signal phasing. I don't know if Sundara's still along. She wants to talk about this one. It's way out there. And
yeah, this would just, improve operations at the intersection. Again, with part of that YVR corridor study, we'd probably be reevaluating any of these intersection improvements, but at least to note that there are some intersections that need a little more attention than others in terms of just optimizing flow and efficiency and safety.
okay. This is the end of it, and you can see that there's some really big numbers and project cost estimates out there about how much we think some of these projects may cost, at least looking at them right now. Whereas some of these projects are, in the $10 million range. So again, not to totally scare you, but that's just where we think they are right now. And that's with the crystal ball that I have. And there was a project that really was on the list, might not have been on the list. We went after some BART safe routes to BART grant money. I had it in the FY21 capital budget. We did not win the grant. And this also was part of really what instigated that whole conversation about the YVR corridor study. And so I throw this in here to say to the commission, we have a preliminary design. You can see a little bit in the graphic there. Some of these improvements were identified in both the West Downtown and North Downtown specific plans. It's not currently sitting in the CIP or the capital budget. And I don't have any funding identified for it. As I said, we went after Safe Routes to BART money and was not successful in getting that money in that first round. But want to know from the commission, where do you think this project goes? What cycle does it go into? Does it go at all? Looking for your thoughts.
I imagine that this project will become more important to get done when the housing is done at BART.
Okay.
Moving people across that street is going to be real difficult.
I agree. I think it's very important. I think it's important now for people who walk, bike, scoot, whatever, to BART.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I heard, do now, and I also heard wait for the housing to be done.
The housing to be done will put pressure on the city to provide safe access across the street.
I don't know. I don't know if Andy knows or Smadar knows when that third phase is scheduled to be done. I know I worked on that project a long time ago to get it through, planning process, but.
Don't have an estimate at this time.
Okay.
Yeah. And what I'll say then is if there is, generally consensus on trying to get this done sooner rather than later, staff would like to try and pursue the next round of funding grant opportunity through Safe Routes to BART. We did receive feedback about, improvements to be made to kind of the scope of work. So if this is something that you'd like us to look into in the next couple of years, then that can get slotted in.
I would think so. And this is not only important for residents who live in Walnut Creek who need to access BART, but this is the first glimpse that riders get when they come in to appreciate our amenities and our arts and our shopping. So I think it's an important project from a lot of different perspectives.
I agree with Commissioner Cagle, and I would like to see this in one of the earlier cycles because I think there does need to be a lot of work done with improving different modes along Ignacio Valley Road, and knowing that study won't happen for a little while, and then any improvements that come thereafter are even further down the road. And so I think this one, it's in so close to downtown, so close to the BART station, and the easier that we can make this intersection for pedestrians and bicyclists, I think is a really good thing, and the sooner that we can make those improvements, the better.
So I'm in agreement in the time frame that everybody else is talking about. If we don't get that safe route to BART funding, which kind of odd, I mean, it is a safe route to BART, but since we don't decide that, like, how does that impact, like, if we move this up to the top, does it impact other projects in the TIF, or just explain that whole budgeting process?
So if you were to say please put TIF money to this, and really we want you to build it, I would say, what projects would you like to shove later down the road that I may have earlier and that you would like to replace it with, and I would really like to know, based on the priorities and some of those other things, how you feel about that. And then as I move forward, and you're the first to see all of this, as I move forward and look at some of the other funding streams, to include the Measure J money, it could be that we find synergy in some other work. So I just kind of want to say that, but I do need some, it would be great to have some concrete feedback about, you know, what projects you would put this in front of. And I can roll to the 22-23. This is what I'm asking you to do, which is ask questions, provide comments. You guys have been doing that. It's great. Really appreciate it. And here's the 22-23 cycle of projects. And if you want, I can roll back to any of those other cycles and put them up on the screen. If you wanted to talk about 24-25, if you wanted to, you know, make some adjustments.
I look at this and I immediately think the traffic signal at Tree Boulevard and Norkel could probably, I mean, it'd be great to do all these projects, but what we're saying is we can't do it all. We don't have the funding and we don't have the resources, the staff time to do it. And to me, the intersection at California Ignacio has to be one of the busiest intersections in all the city. And it's a key link, obviously, between BART and downtown and the residences that are going there. So in my mind, it needs to happen very quickly, very soon. And ideally, before the apartments are done, so we're not having accidents, more accidents with all the you know, new residents that are there. So when I look at this schedule, the Tree Boulevard Norkel seems to be a lower priority. Again, not important, just not unimportant, just not as vital.
I'm with Danny on that. I mean, you're $400,000 short on that project as it is, but you have $500,000 for that. So if you put the money, that 500,000 to 250 towards the Shadelands projects and 250 towards I don't know what the price of this intersection is, but that frees up $500,000 when you're still wondering where another 400,000 is coming from. And I just did some quick math, back of the napkin math. That Shadelands Sports Center will have about 300,000 trips per month of kids going in there. So I do think that's a priority to pay attention to that route there on that budget.
Given all the discussion about Ignacio's different plans, yeah, I'd love to see that study on the corridor moved up several years. I'm okay with the California and Ignacio study being moved up also, but I think there should be one vision for all of Ignacio, all the way through. And then the products coming off of that study.
Agreed. Okay.
Could some of this be considered citywide traffic calming and some of those funds from 22-23 be devoted to this? I mean.
Yeah, the citywide traffic calming really is supposed to be for addressing speeding on residential streets.
Anybody else? This is great feedback. I really appreciate it. I love hearing all of this stuff because Spinar and I have been banging this stuff around for the past week or so. And it's great to have somebody else look at this and say, who's interested in it anyway, to really give us the feedback.
The item for the road fiber optics, really should look at having other departments co-fund that and use the service. So
I agree with you. I think I'll take that feedback and see if I can get somebody else to help.
Yeah.
Andy, you guys got any money over in CDD?
If this wasn't a public meeting, I'm sure I would come up with a rather pithy response.
I just want to echo what Commissioner Mills was saying about the traffic signal at Treat and Norkel. That was one, as I was reading through prior to this meeting, that I wasn't sure how high of a priority that would be. I do think it's a good project. I just don't know. I feel like the impact to the number of pedestrians and bicyclists at the near the BART station is much more critical, and would probably have a bigger impact on the safety of more people than that project. And that is, as Commissioner Ash mentioned, it's also a pretty sizable cost allocation. And I mean, honestly, there are a few other things on here that I think are also good projects, but I would prioritize lower than something that's so close to the BART station. So I don't know if that, like the Walnut Boulevard sidewalk design piece, if that needs to be in this budget cycle, given the construction isn't until 2 budget cycles later. I don't know if that could be pushed out. And I'm a little less, I feel a little less strongly about the Shadelands multimodal improvements than Commissioner Ash. I think I think it's an important project, and I think it will make a meaningful difference, but I don't see this as strong of a safety issue there as I see at that intersection near BART. It just seems like such an important piece.
Okay. Does anybody want to look at anything else or have any other comments?
No, the other comment on that Treat Boulevard thing is if you take that route anytime between 2 p.m. and 6:30, the lights between, all the way from Oak Grove are so far back. The cars are so far typically backed up. You're not going anywhere. You're stopped in front of Condolet High School there anyway. So I'd be curious if that doesn't get moved, which I think we're all in agreement here to recommend to delay that. I'd want to see some traffic studies about how that became a priority to you.
Awesome. This is great feedback. Anything else?
Just overall, I commend you. This is really difficult, and these are really difficult decisions. So thank you for the work that you put into it. I agree mostly on the reprioritization to a certain extent with the intersection we were just talking about. And also the YVR study, if there's any way, shape, or form, I just think that's such an important corridor regionally, even with our neighboring cities, ways to look at how to prioritize that. And then the work on Lincoln Avenue, I mean, that is something that we've gone down a significant path so far to explore. And, it's a shame to see it pushed a bit out. It's also a neighborhood that I would imagine has more turnover as far as residents are concerned, because there's, quite a bit of apartment buildings and things like that. So, you might not hear from folks as much about the importance of this project, given that, since there may be turnover, but I do think that, making that connection to downtown would be fantastic. Looking at some of the other projects, when I got to fiscal years 28 and 29, and I saw that, for instance, like the Olympic corridor trail connector study was going to be pushed, moved back from 1820, and the Newell Bridge widening was going to be pushed back. My heart kind of sunk because I wanted to see projects like that be able to move forward faster. But I certainly understand the reasoning and the fiscal challenges. So that's all the feedback I have for now. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Really appreciate the feedback from all of you. I know it's hard work to go through all of this data and try to crunch it up between the time you got the packet and to sit in this meeting. And there are a lot of numbers and a lot of information in there. So really want to thank you very much for really looking at this and caring about these projects and how the city looks at things holistically. It gives me a great first step going into the other and into the rest of the CIP and first step into the capital budget. So looking forward to coming back in March to bring you back a little more refined piece and more detail on we'll focus more on the capital budget pieces and then just incorporate as many of your comments as I can with the feedback that I get between now and March.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't believe that we're going to have any public comment looking at the list of attendees, but we do,
Yeah.
from a standpoint, need to ask for public comment. Would you like me to?
First, I want to thank staff for the presentation. And then, yes, could you ask for public comment?
Okay, thank you. So the chair now asks if any member of the public wishes to provide public comments at this time. Please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you are connected by audio only, if you would like to provide a public comment. And looking over, there is nobody raising their hand. So we have no members of the public wishing to provide comments. So thank you for allowing me to do that.
Okay. Again, thanks to staff. Does the chair or does the staff have any comments about things they wanted to mention?
So we're moving on to item 6, commission and staff brief announcements.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. Actually, before staff jumps in, I'd like to turn that to the commissioners. If anybody does have anything. Seeing none. Okay, well, in that case, I myself do not have anything, any reports for this particular meeting, but we do have 2 brief reports from our traffic engineering staff, starting with Jason Bustos.
Thanks, Andy. Good evening, commissioners. I am Jason Bustos, an assistant engineer for traffic engineering. I have a quick staff update, just 2 slides. I will go ahead and share my screen now. Okay, so at the end of last year, we had 2 construction projects that improved some of our bike facilities throughout the city. The first project consisted of adding green material to existing bike lanes at various intersections. So you see here on these slides, the top 2 pictures are off of YVR. The first one's at San Carlos and the second one's at Bancroft. And the bottom 2 pictures are on California. The one on the left is between Mount Diablo and Olympic, and the one on the right is the intersection at California and YVR. So we added green material. It's high friction, non-slip, it's durable, and it should last 5 to 8 years or longer. So we're very happy with the results. And also part of that same project, the Contra Costa Canal Trail crossing at Bancroft received an uplift. That's the bottom left picture here. We installed a kind of hybrid crosswalk that combines a high visibility crosswalk and bike lane. And then the second project was a paving project along Parkside and North Broadway. Carlton mentioned that earlier. We took this as an opportunity to add a bike lane in the northbound direction on Broadway between YVR and Parkside in the northbound direction, and in the southbound direction we installed sharrows for a shared bike facility. So overall, we've improved about 3/4 of a mile of bike facilities between these 2 projects, and that completes my quick staff update. If you have any comments or questions, I'm available. All right, thank you very much.
Okay, I guess I'll go. I have a quick staff update. Smadar Boardman, traffic engineer. I am leaving on maternity leave starting tomorrow. So I will be returning probably in May. So I may miss a couple meetings here, and I will I'll miss you all, but you are in good hands. So please do feel free to contact any of the staff if you have any questions, coming up here.
Will there be a temporary traffic engineer?
So what we're doing is we have somebody who's in our development engineering. He's taking over the supervisory role. And we have a couple of consultants on call to assist with any, very detailed technical questions. But otherwise, Jason Bustos and Unari are still on staff. Matt Redmond also actually welcomed an addition back in November. So, but he'll be returning the beginning of March. So he'll also be on hand to answer any questions or be available.
Congratulations.
Yeah, mazel tov.
Thank you.
So I believe that's all of the announcements from staff. And yeah, so back to you, Mr. Chair.
Does anybody have any comments or questions? Barring that, I ask that we adjourn for the evening.
Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye.